All right. Well, joining me today on Let's Connect here live back together because I was on his podcast, as I mentioned. Dr. Friedemann Schaub is here, and I'm so excited that we're reconnecting, but this time so I can introduce you to all of my community over here in Canada. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to see you again. I was really excited to
Yeah.
talk to you.
Yeah, I have been following your work since we first connected on your podcast, and have to say I just really admire the work you're doing in this, especially in the field of anxiety and depression, and really helping people through that. If you were to just take me back to the early days of Friedemann before all this happened, because
How
you've
early do
worn
you
a
want to
lot.
go?
Oh man, well you've worn a lot of hats. Like I mean,
Yeah.
like physicist, and then I mean this into the author and all the stuff you're doing. But yeah, when did this all begin? Like when did you even get the little spark to know that this is what you wanted to do?
Well, I think it started actually when I was a child with dealing with anxiety. So, my parents were both very anxious. They came from the World War II generation, and my mom had lost everything and had to flee from the Russians. And my dad grew up without a father and, four siblings. And so they were poor. And I think, the war didn't help. My father was a 17-year-old boy in the war who ended up also in a war prison camp. So they had a lot of anxiety that they, through their how they talked, how they thought, how they behaved, transferred to their children. So I definitely was a anxious child, and I didn't know what to do with this. My parents didn't know either. So my go-to was basically at the beginning of my life just to ignore it. Didn't work very well. And then I figured out, well, maybe I need to really work hard in order to somehow get a sense of love and safety from my parents, because they were not so pleased at the beginning with my grades. So I developed this belief of I'm not lovable if I don't have the best grades. I'm not good enough if I'm not really, performing well. And so that really created then a belief and a pattern that went through until my 30s. I always had the feeling I had to be number one. I became a physician because my parents were physicians. I stayed in a university hospital because I thought I needed to become a professor to really, be on the top of the top. And then I had these anxiety and panic attacks during that time as a resident, where I kind of realized I need to take a break. I need to make a little course correction, because if I continue to do this, I'm probably going to burn out. So I got a stipend from the German government to go into research. And so that's how I ended up in Seattle at the University of Washington to do some basic research, postdoctoral research. Then I really got into it. I loved this, just looking into the wisdom of the cells. And I was fascinated by how actually powerful we are, because, in medicine, you learn the opposite. You just learn, well, we are kind of flawed little lemons, and, the doctors need to come in and basically just try to keep us together. And there in research, it was like, no, every cell has so much potential and so much power. There is, really so much that we don't know yet, and so much to discover. So I got so into it that I said, I'm gonna stay in research. And so I became then a molecular biologist and got a PhD in that. And then after 7-8 years, I also thought, I really want to help people. This is not necessarily what I want to do. And so I went back to remembering how many of my cardiology clients were dealing with stress and anxiety, and how that was really a root cause for their issues. Whether they had the heart attack before because they had stress, or afterwards they were so anxious. And so that's when I, circled back to anxiety that, strangely enough, during that time, I had overcome through different methods, such as yoga and such as meditation. And I really felt like, now I understand myself better. How can I help other people more? And then I delved into the subconscious mind, because for me, it just felt like regular therapy and just talking about it doesn't go to the emotional level. We need to go deeper than that. There needs to be something on a deep level that is really responsible for creating the emotions, because emotions are not really something that make logical sense. And B, also are giving us a reason why the emotions are there. We cannot just dismiss anxiety or depression as a malfunctioning of the brain. We have to understand that there is something that an intelligence inside of us wants to convey to us through the emotions, and it can't if we are just ignoring it. And the subconscious was just the perfect aspect of our mind to really delve into and see what can the subconscious really teach us about why it creates anxiety and how we can resolve it. And that's how
Wow.
this work developed.
Holy moly, that is quite the journey. I'm noticing as as you were speaking, and then the lights went on when you wanted to work with people as we're talking, although people can't see this visually. The sun came out in the place I'm sitting as you were speaking. I'm like, everything is so connected with you. It's amazing. It's a powerful thing.
Well,
Yeah.
it was definitely for me, an awakening, and it wasn't so smooth. It sounds all nice and good, but it went through a lot of, as you know, with your own journey, you go through trials and tribulations, and something inside of you says yes, but then my own insecurity said, oh no, I cannot leave, all these
Yeah.
years of studying, and what will people say? They will all think I'm crazy. And, my parents certainly thought I was crazy because, first I'm a physician, then I'm a researcher, and now you want to do this? It wasn't
Yeah.
so easy, but eventually everything fell together.
Yeah, I hear that. I've noticed too in your story that, anxiety has traveled with you for a long time, like from being a child all the way through. And I'm just curious right now, like when you look back on it, what have you discovered about anxiety? Like, what is anxiety? Because I hear this word all the time in our culture, and people say, I have anxiety. But like, what is it in your mind after it traveling with you for so long? What does it mean?
Well, there are two layers to this. One layer is the anxiety that is self-protective, where it's about, let's say, you worry about the unknown because somehow, you want to be vigilant to not get, let's say, in danger or judged or rejected. And for me, it was certainly a sense of I wanted to belong, and I wanted to not, get abandoned by my parents because I thought they only love me if I really gonna have good grades. So that's creates anxiety. So that's a self-protective aspect. And
Hmm.
and that is, the people often say fear is when you really know what you're afraid of, like flying, spiders, squirrels, whatever. And anxiety is more the unknown. I think sometimes it's semantics, but the point is that is where this feeling of, doubt or worry or insecurity and all its flavors has been really evolutionary preserved since hundreds of thousands of years. So there is a reason for that. And the reason was initially self-protection. But the second
Self-protection.
layer, I think, the second layer is much more interesting. And that's something that I think I understood later on more clearly, that the second layer is basically that there is something inside of us that tells us we are disconnected from ourselves. It's like the further we feel disconnected from our truth, our
Mm-hmm.
soul, our purpose, whatever you want to call it, the more anxious we are. I was on the wrong path when I was in cardiology. I was highly driven. I was all in my head. I was all looking for accolades. I told people I'm a doctor. I didn't even see myself as a human being. I only saw myself in that role. And that was so far
Wow.
off. And I realized that I was far off because I found myself sometimes going to a church. And not that I was particularly religious, but I was looking for something. I wanted to find that place of peace again. And
Right.
that's only something we can find inside. And so when I work with people, I often see the first is to find safety and security. That's, where the anxiety finds a huge relief when you address where it comes from. But the second step is really to find yourself. And when you
Mm.
find yourself and you find a home inside of you and you understand more who you are, then the anxiety is completely quiet. It's almost like it just nudges you until you're finally looking inside. And that's what I see
Wow.
with people, especially that are so busy, 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 and they
Hmm.
never really look inside. And all of a sudden the anxiety makes them stop and for the first time have to feel themselves again. And the
Hmm.
anxiety needs to do this in a very strong form because otherwise we wouldn't pay attention. it's like with the pain. We only pay attention when the pain is strong enough to actually to make a stop and figure out what the pain is all about. And that is a pain of disconnection from ourselves that I think anxiety is often really at the root of it.
Wow. Well, I'm just thinking as you're speaking about the state of our world these days, and I mean, every second person I bump into speaks about how anxious they are. So would you say that like the majority of the world is off purpose or disconnected from their true self right now? What's your take on that?
I do feel that we are disconnected because we are identifying ourselves so much more with what we do or what we
Yeah.
have and what we can purchase and what,
Yeah.
careers. And we are not really identifying ourselves with the person that we are. And so when people lose their job or they, have less money or they are, divorcing, all of a sudden they feel completely lost because they don't really know who they are and what to hold on to. And part of it is also that we don't really sit with ourselves. I mean, even when we're sitting at home, the TV is running, we are on our phones, we are so outside of ourselves. So the disconnection comes also from that lifestyle of constantly looking outside and, comparing ourselves, thinking what other people are doing on social media, what are we not doing? And it's
Yeah.
not really a quest for the self. And I think that's, one of the main reasons why there is an anxiety epidemic.
Yeah, it really does feel like an epidemic. I'd agree with you on that for sure. How is it for you? I mean, I'm curious just because I'm very much in the same field as you in a lot of ways in terms of helping people through this. I find personally being a practitioner of this, it's easy to speak about, but oh my goodness, can it be hard to integrate because the distractions are all around me. I'm constantly pulled out of the present moment and feeling this. How do you cope with it being in this field?
I have to say my clients are amazing teachers because they always seem to mirror back to me what I'm struggling with. So I'm always thinking, okay, what clients do I attract right now? Oh yeah,
Yeah.
okay, that's what you need to also focus on. And I had to move away out of the city. We lived in Seattle in the middle of the city, 5 hospitals around us, airport not too far. It was just really so much stimulation. And now we're living in the country and it's very quiet. And, that really helped me to not
Yeah.
get too distracted. But it is a discipline. You have to ask yourself when you want to have 10 minutes of just disconnecting from work, what do you want to connect with? Do you want to watch the news? Or in my case, I'm lucky that we have horses. I'm going to go out and give some carrots to the horses. And just doing
Wow.
that, being with the animals connects you so much more with nature and through nature also with yourself. So these choices are available to all of us. We can just, I think looking at a tree is something that connects you. You don't even have to leave the house, but just watching a tree being steady and maybe flexible in the wind, but just seeing the beauty of that piece of art of nature, that can connect you. We just have to really not feel, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to do hours of connection to really feel centered. I think the
Yeah.
more often we do it daily, the faster it goes. It doesn't have to be very complicated, I think.
Wow. That is beautiful. You speak to, and I just keep getting the sense of like the mind-body connection.
Hmm.
And I mean, most of us are living most of the time in our mind, I believe. But can you speak a little bit about your experience and research and awareness of the mind-body connection and how that plays into all of this as well?
Well, I think it's very important, the mind-body connection.
Yeah.
And that is something that I feel like I have as a, hello.
You know what's crazy right now as we're talking is my iPad is secretly listening into our conversation in another part of my room. And
Really?
yeah, like I don't have that I don't have that, hey, Alexa thing. This is wild that this is happening right now, that we're so distracted that we can't even have a podcast conversation without these computers interrupting what we're talking about.
So
Amazing.
do you have to turn it off, or is
On
it?
behalf of my iPad, I'm sorry to interrupt our conversation.
Well, you're forgiving, but not the iPad. Is that
Yeah.
that it's going to stop automatically, or what's it going to do?
Yeah, it's back to normal. So back to the mind body connection.
Well,
Yeah.
the mind-body connection, I think, is important to, in the context also of the subconscious mind, because the subconscious is kind of, the intercessor between our conscious mind and our physical body. So when we are giving any command, like, just lifting an arm, for example, there are like 15 muscles that we are either flexing or relaxing in order to do this, but it happens automatically. And
Mm.
that is where the subconscious is really just following through with the command and make sure that we are, doing exactly what the conscious mind is intending to do. So the subconscious is very powerful. Now, the subconscious also is putting our emotions sometimes into the physical body. Like, we all know stomach aches can come from just stress, or the pain in the neck when you have really a terrible relationship, or I have clients sometimes that just have these interesting sensations like dizziness, where they know, well, I'm feeling totally unstable in my life right now, and so I feel like this this dizziness is constantly with me, and then when their situation changes, all of a sudden the dizziness disappears. So there are a lot of metaphorical manifestations of emotional or situational problems in our lives. And that's, again, the subconscious doing this. And I think if we would pay more attention, then the subconscious wouldn't necessarily have to put this in the body, because I think sometimes, we are creating physical expressions of our emotions because we haven't listened to our emotions. You say we are mostly in our minds, but we are not really in our emotions. We are avoiding our emotions, especially when they are uncomfortable. When you and I, have experienced this, you feel anxious, you feel stressed. Oh, let's distract yourself. Let's not think about it. Let's self-medicate or whatever it is. But the uncomfortable emotions we shove aside. And that is, I think, sometimes when the subconscious says, okay, you're not paying attention to your feelings, let's put it into your body. And that can
Right.
be lack of sleep, but it can also be physical problems. And I could talk for hours about the mind-body connection, because it's one of the most undervalued keys to healing in our Western medicine. If Western medicine would be a little bit more open to hear that the emotions and beliefs create even autoimmune diseases or cancer, and if
Mm.
then we would be not only focusing on the physical form of the problem, but also in the emotional form, I think healing would happen much faster. I mean, like,
Wow.
especially autoimmune diseases, that's such a shame that we are not understanding that it's a battle with ourselves. The autoimmune disease
Wow.
is like the body fights itself. And why does the body fight itself? Because you have some kind of a conflict inside of you that you don't resolve. And I'm not just talking theoretically. I had
Hmm.
many clients that had Crohn's disease, colitis, and fibromyalgia. That is, they are all considered autoimmune diseases. But by resolving the conflict that was causing them in the first place, their symptoms went away. And that's something that I feel like we need to remember. There is a lot of healing we can do ourselves. Of course, doctors can help, but there is also a responsibility to take care of our own healing by acknowledging the mind-body connection and what's possible when we work with it.
Wow. I'm just like, well, I have a million questions for you now on this. First, it's so refreshing to hear a doctor speaking about the mind-body connection in this way, in addition to Western medicine. Why do you think like Western medicine hasn't fully adopted this emotional piece that you're speaking about? Like, what's the resistance there? What's happening there?
Well, I think partially it's that there's just not really time to delve into psychological problems.
Mm,
You have 6 minutes with the patients on average as a physician, and
yeah,
all you can do is just like, how is the medication working? Let me write another prescription. Off you go. And that is
yeah,
just unfortunately more the industrialized way medicine is working, and we're seeing more as little machines than real individuals. And that's one problem. I don't think that there is space for doctors to really delve into that. But the other issue is also that pharmaceutical industry has a lot of power over how Western medicine works. And pharmaceutical industry is not interested in the mind-body connection. It's interested in symptom dealing and symptom fighting. And so whatever they can develop to make you pain-free or to suppress the inflammation, to make more billions and billions, that's what the research goes to. So there is not a lot of research sponsored in regards to mind-body connection. There's some, there are many about meditation, mindfulness meditation as a route to, reduce blood pressure and also inflammation and things like that. So, but that's not necessarily something where the money goes, because research is ultimately money driven. And, unfortunately, that is not a place where there is a lot of financial backing yet. Hopefully at some point, but not happening yet so much.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for your honesty on that. And it kind of makes me frustrated to hear that and to realize that, because like you're saying, like autoimmune disease and the connection to potential cures for cancer, and just even in the clients that you've worked with, hearing some of those stories. I've definitely had a similar thing in my work, just seeing people shift their beliefs or shift their state on an emotional level, and healing takes place. And it's like, wow, that's incredible.